the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
13 people have been charged in an alleged domestic terrorism plot to overthrow the government and kidnap Michigan Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Some of the suspects associated with the militia group that calls themselves the Wolverine Watchmen were allegedly gathering intel on local law enforcement and training to attack the Michigan Capitol building. Whitmer on Thursday thanked FBI agents for foiling the plot and called out the president for, quote, giving comfort to those who spread fear and hatred and division.
So let me say this loud and clear. Hatred, bigotry, and violence have no place in the great state of Michigan. If you break the law or conspire to commit heinous acts of violence against anyone, we will find you, we will hold you accountable, and we will bring you to justice.
Donald Trump and some of his supporters have long criticized Whitmer for her strict approach to coronavirus restrictions. There's been a nationwide increase in vigilante and militia activity in the wake of widespread protests and political uncertainty, and there are legitimate and growing concerns that militia groups will try to intimidate voters as the election nears. So on Thursday, the FBI charged 6 people with plotting to kidnap Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. 7 others, members of that right-wing so-called militia group Wolverine Watchmen, face state charges of targeting police and threatening to instigate civil war. Seriously. Investigators believe some of the defendants participated in armed protests against Whitmer's coronavirus lockdown and plan to put her on trial for treason. This alleged domestic terrorist plot included plans to overthrow state governments that defendants believe are violating the U.S. Constitution. Donald Trump responded, but not like any normal president would, by condemning the terrorists. Instead, Trump attacked Governor Whitmer. Typical. In pandemic news, the United States is now averaging more than 45,000 new COVID-19 positive tests each day. That's more than double the numbers from June. And it's causing more concern for a potentially devastating winter. The CDC is now predicting deaths in the United States could reach 233,000 by the end of this month. And projections from the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation show more than 2,900 Americans could die daily by January. Well, countries around the world are revving up their vaccine efforts. China just joined the World Health Organization's COVAX initiative, in which nations are working together to provide global access to effective COVID-19 vaccines. More than 75 high-income countries have committed money to the project. The United States, which severed its ties to the World Health Organization, and Russia are not among them. So Nancy Pelosi raised some eyebrows on Thursday when she said this.
Well, I don't know what the prospects are when we hear people saying I'm young and I'm a perfect specimen, instead of addressing the fact that 50,000 people were infected, reported to be infected yesterday. Nearly 1,000 people died. What are we talking about here? Tomorrow, by the way, come here tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment, but not to take attention away from the subject we have now.
Huh? Well, Pelosi's office announced that she and Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland would formally introduce the bill at a news conference on Capitol Hill Friday morning, and they did.
In the age of COVID-19, which has killed more than 210,000 Americans and now ravaged the White House staff, the wisdom of the 25th Amendment is clear. What happens if a president, any president, ends up in a coma or on a ventilator and has made no provisions for the temporary transfer of power? Who has the powers of the presidency at that point? Is it the chief of staff? Is it the vice president? Is it the secretary of state? This situation is what demands action under Section 4.
So Mitch McConnell finally gave one reason for why he has not participated in the on-again, off-again, on-again negotiations over another coronavirus relief package. Trump, the great deal maker, hasn't participated, nor have any Republican congressional leaders from the House or Senate. But Mitch McConnell explained his absence in a stunning comment on Thursday.
I haven't actually been to the White House since August the 6th because my impression was Their approach to how to handle this was different from mine and what I insisted that we do in the Senate, which is to wear a mask and practice social distancing.
So who has Nancy Pelosi been negotiating with? Well, that would be Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. They reportedly resumed discussions on Thursday, reviving hopes of a possible stimulus deal after Trump abruptly called off negotiations until after the election just a couple of days ago. Pelosi and Mnuchin reportedly spoke for about 40 minutes on the prospect of a comprehensive bill. We'll see what happens. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
The Leslie Marshall Show, the only true democracy in talk radio, of, for, and by you, the people. Live nationwide and streaming live at lesliemarshallshow.com. Call in with your thoughts at 888-6-LESLIE.
Here to set you free. How are you doing? I'm Leslie Marshall. Happy Tuesday. Welcome or welcome back. Only true democracy in talk. Thank you for listening on radio, on stream, and on podcast for those of you who get the show when you want, and that is the way you want. Also, thank you for watching on Twitter's Periscope, YouTube Live, there is a B in that, and Facebook Live. I am your host, and more than a pleasure to have back on the program President of the United Steelworkers, the USW, Mr. Tom Conway. The USW is North America's largest industrial union. They have 1.2 million members and retirees strong in this nation, Canada, and the Caribbean. And they proudly represent men and women who work in nearly every industry there is. Tom is the union's most experienced contract negotiator in steel, aluminum, oil, and other major industries where USW members work, often directing bargaining during crises. More than a pleasure to have President Conway back with us. President Conway, thank you for joining us. It's a busy time for both of us, and I'm glad that you could make the time, sir. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm happy to be back, Leslie.
And happy to have you back, sir. There's so much to talk about. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. We have now seen in the state of Nevada a gentleman who has been reinfected with COVID, and it seems he is worse than the first time around. We've seen 28 out of our 50 states have upticks in recent days, and a lot of physicians concerned with winter coming and flu season coming and people being indoors, that things could only get worse. Is it fair to say that this pandemic, COVID-19, has more than ever demonstrated, or in present day demonstrated, how essential manufacturing is to not only Americans as essential, but to keeping Americans safe?
Look, I think if anything, it's been eye-opening for Americans to realize that when this happened and this pandemic hit, that our government was so unprepared to deal with it, and that we didn't have mask makers in this country, and we didn't have a supply of ventilators, and we didn't have the kinds of gowns and protective equipment that even our first responders and hospitals needed, let alone the testing equipment for it. And we've all heard the stories now about how the administration dismantled much of that had been left in place for them. But even beyond that, and anybody hits peaks, and you can't be prepared for every peak in anything that goes on. But we really were unprepared for this and did not have the wherewithal to manufacture things. And then the government and the administration was slow to tell companies under the Defense Production Act, you've got to set aside what you're doing and gear up to do this and get us up there. So, we struggled on so many ways. And as we're going into what feels like this second wave, we still kind of don't know a lot about this virus, and we seem to be learning more, and the kind of things you mentioned earlier with people getting it a second time and what now are long haulers, and we still don't have a plan in place to sort of get us where we need to be. And we're not attacking this strategically, not just in America, but in the world. When you think that America has only 5% of the world's population, but we've got over 20% of the deaths, it's really stunning that that's happening in America, and that we're not leading the world in this, and we've withdrawn from the World Health Organization, and just sort of a crazy approach to anything. So besides manufacturing, I think it's taught us a lot about, what we were prepared for. And then the scientists that we rely upon, the CDC and the FDA and those other agencies that really have been that sort of place where we went for validation, now it's politicized, and we're in the middle of one guy's ego and trying to control what our medical experts want to say to us and talk to us about. And so it's just been, you really can't think of anything that's been mishandled on this scale in this country in just as long as I can remember.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is unprecedented. If you look at pandemics here or worldwide that the United States has been affected by one, in some way, shape, or form, there's never been a medical pandemic, a viral pandemic politicized. I mean, ever in the history of America, or quite frankly, that I can even think of the history of the world. When we started, our COVID-19 journey here in the United States, we had a vast amount of shortages of PPE. And at the beginning in March, we Americans became very aware how dependent we are as a nation on foreign goods. Has that changed going forward into winter, President Conway? Because the PPE, shortages are a concern, but also disruption in the supply chain is a concern. And that's something a lot of people have feared. And just looking at that dependency on foreign goods, also the level of vulnerability and how vulnerable we as a nation are with that dependency. Can you speak to that?
Look, I think people need to look past just medical stuff. And so the medical stuff ought to just terrify us, that we had to go literally get stuff from China and from other places around the world, and to try and get to retool our own hospitals and have them ready to deal with this, and make sure that ambulance drivers and EMTs and police and whoever else in the hospitals were going to deal with this. But it ought to make the country then say, well, if we weren't prepared for this, what else aren't we prepared for? What else don't we make anymore that really is essential? When you begin to look through America's products, you're going to find that phenomena over and over and over again on every sort of manufactured piece. And so I think the country understands that, and they are beginning to say, look, we can't be reliant upon everyone else. When a pandemic breaks out, we can't tell each state, well, you're on your own. Go see if you can buy it from Korea or China or Taiwan or Thailand. It's just no way to run a country. And that's what we're doing in so many other areas as well. So I think as I look at where we're going forward as a country, I look at what Biden's saying about his Buy American and invest in America and invest in American manufacturing and retool and revitalize it and invest in R&D. That's the sort of comprehensive Marshall Plan level kind of approach that America has to have. And then we've got to approach it as we did the rebuilding of Europe. And we have an opportunity here, and America has to make the very best of it and make that investment in ourselves. So in the future, we're in a good shape, and it creates jobs. It creates a thriving income and an economy and a place for young people to be able to get solid careers and move forward. And it's just so important about our infrastructure and our country and where our country is going into the future.
Absolutely, because COVID-19 has had a lot of domino effects and affected other areas where we need different types of equipment. I mean, more steel for our military, more transportation equipment so that we can carry food and other things that we need, like that PPE and other medical supplies. Is it fair to say that not only has Donald Trump failed with COVID-19 and this pandemic for America, but he has failed to rebuild our manufacturing muscle, which is more absolutely needed, not just for job creation, but for safety and for essential workers?
In the month of May, we had dams collapse in Michigan, in central Michigan, wiped out entire communities, left them under 25 foot of water. But those dams were deficient, and we knew about it for 20 years, but we didn't do anything about it. We had no plan to make sure those dams were going to hold. And that infrastructure and those conditions exist everywhere across our nation, in our bridges, in our roads, in our waterways, in our locks, in our dams, in the way that the country is set up in our electrical grid, in the kind of yield that we lose across an old grid. And the country is just aged now. Our infrastructure is aged. Our infrastructures, our interstate roads are aged.
Absolutely. President Conway, I hate to interrupt you. We got to hit a break here. When we come back, we'll talk more about manufacturing.
Okay.
And we'll talk about Joe Biden's plan to revive that. Back after this.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could write him a text or knit him a sweater. If you can't be together, you could write him a letter. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking. You could chat on the game, kick off your flip-flops. You could ask on your couch while you binge watch. However you do it, you gotta ask a friend. And if they don't share, you can ask again. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health. Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the JED Foundation.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1985. That was the day that clerical and support staff at Columbia University went out on strike. More than 1,000 staff members were represented by the United Auto Workers District 65. The workers wanted improvements in their benefits and their wages. They were also concerned by pay discrimination for women and minorities. 2 days before the proposed strike was set to begin, the workers held a rally. Trade union leaders spoke out in support of the clerical staff. In a show of solidarity among Ivy League schools, members of the clerical staff union from Yale University made the trip from New Haven, Connecticut to New York City to support the Columbia workers. The Yale union had won its first contract just the year before after a 10-week strike. The Yale delegation chanted, "We love you, 65. Oh, yes, we do. We whipped the Ivy League, and you can too." The strike lasted for 5 days. Some of the students formed the support group Students for a Fair Contract and helped pass out leaflets on the picket line. The Teamsters refused to cross the picket lines, stopping deliveries to the campus. According to the Columbia Spectator newspaper, the final contract included significant gains for the members. They won a 6% increase with retroactivity and additional hikes for minority workers, lower deductibles on medical insurance, and non-discriminatory clause and new technology language. The union's victory at Columbia was part of a wave of strikes by clerical workers at some of the nation's top schools. Stanford University went on strike in 1974 and 1982. Cornell's staff held 3 strikes during the 1980s. The workers who run these elite, well-funded institutions were standing up for their rights as workers.
That's Bruce Springsteen with his contribution to the Joe Biden or Biden-Harris ticket and camp. And many of you have probably already heard that. That's The Rising and his contribution to technically the 2020 DNC for Joe Biden. We're going to be talking about Joe Biden and his proposals coming up in just a bit. We continue our conversation with President Tom Conway. He's president of the United Steelworkers, the USW, North America's largest industrial union. Follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Steelworkers, and the website is usw.org. Before we turn to the Democratic nominee and former Vice President, Mr. Conway, even before COVID-19 struck, as you were speaking before the break about manufacturing and the failure of Donald Trump and his administration, some people would say manufacturing was in a recession before COVID-19 struck. Let's look at some companies here in the United States. The USS Great Lakes Works announced it was going to indefinitely idle operations last year and lay off more than 1,500 workers. Goodyear began laying off hundreds of workers in 20, shipping American jobs to Mexico. Manufacturing workers at Carrier, Freight Car America, and others facing similar challenges. The many blue-collar union working men and women voted for Donald Trump because they believed his promise that he would save jobs and he would bring manufacturing back and save those manufacturing jobs. And COVID-19 is not an excuse to his failure with manufacturing, since manufacturing was in a recession before this pandemic hit. Am I correct in that?
No, that's right. There's this perception, because so much is done through this administration through smoke and mirrors, that there was this great job revival going on. But in fact, there were a lot of plant closures and a lot of struggles taking place before this pandemic hit. So just some of the places you mentioned, 1,500 jobs in Detroit at the Great Lakes plant, another 12 to 1,300 in Alabama at Goodyear's tire plant. And the list goes on and on. There were multiple shutdowns and permanent closings in manufacturing in general. So his policy of sort of, well, I'm going to make believe I'm getting tough with China, when in fact, all he did was alienate the rest of the world, and products just shifted around and came in from many other places. So American manufacturing has been struggling for a while, and the pandemic has just worsened it. And this administration is going to end up with less jobs in manufacturing than it found itself when it started here. And so for all the talk of gains in manufacturing jobs, this will be an administration that has a net loss in manufacturing. And those are good jobs. They pay better, they pay more, they're crucial to what goes on inside of communities. You know, if you have a few thriving factories, you have a solid payroll in your community, you can afford your services and your schools and your police and fire forces, and just manufacturing is the backbone of an economy. You know, you're not going to make money off of finance and everybody having financial engineering algorithms in their computer if you don't mine something and mill it and put capital and labor against it. You really don't have a product to bring to a market, and you can't just build an entire economy off of services. So that's where we find ourselves as the pandemic struck, in manufacturing at least.
You know, a lot of people like to blame NAFTA, and they like to blame a Democrat, Bill Clinton, who was president at the time and who signed NAFTA into law. And the Trump administration likes to tout how they fixed NAFTA and made NAFTA better. There are even some Democrats who think that Trump did. But what a lot of people who, whether they support Trump or they just want to look at, you know, putting everything on the onus of NAFTA with regard to jobs going overseas, the Trump administration awarded more than $425 billion, with a B, $425 billion in federal contracts to corporations listed among those responsible for offshoring 200,000 American jobs. That's during the first 4 years and hopefully last of his presidency. So the Trump administration is complicit in helping corporations who offshore jobs and have offshored over 200,000 American jobs just in the past 4 years overseas. And you know, this is something that it's like a dirty little secret. It should be front page news.
Look, when he put through his tax plan that they call the middle class tax plan, and everybody's going to get a little money, the trick within there was, well, we're going to hold a little bit more, we're going to withhold a little less from your weekly paycheck, but you're going to owe that tax at the end of the year. So nobody got a break on that. Instead, nearly $2 trillion went to big corporations and the ultra rich who made out very, very well on that tax break. They all got tax cuts, and those companies who got that, the big corporations, continued to offshore, and in fact then didn't have to pay taxes on the earnings they had from offshore. So he incented those companies to move more work offshore, and the whole tax scheme that he continues to talk about did not do anything to the average worker's paycheck, and instead just left him with a bigger tax bill at the end of the year. And so it's all been just sort of, you know, what can I tweet about and get myself a headline and convince people that I'm doing something for them, when in fact he didn't do anything to benefit them all and cause them harm. And even this most recent little stunt with Social Security, if we don't fund Social Security regularly the way we're supposed to, if America doesn't think that this is the first step towards saying, oh, well, we gave you a break in it, but now it's broke. Now we're in trouble because we didn't put money in for a year or so. And we've got to make some changes in our entitlements and Social Security. America shouldn't fall for that trick coming out of this administration. And that's the road he has us heading down again.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will continue with President Conway, president of the United Steelworkers. In the break, go to their website, USW.org. Follow them on Twitter and Instagram as well, at Steelworkers. Coming back, we'll talk about Joe Biden, what his plan is to change this.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com. Follow Leslie on Twitter Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
If you're a rich Republican who's been in the U.S. House so long and done so little that you're essentially seen as a piece of congressional furniture, what do you do when faced back home with a popular, well-organized grassroots opponent who's about to overtake you? How about unleashing your inner racist to assail your challenger as a demonic civil liberties zealot who will let hordes of black, Latino, and other criminal elements rampage through white neighborhoods? Endangered Republican incumbents across the country are resorting to this shameful Jim Crow political tactic in a panicky effort to deflect attention from their own do-nothing records. Take longtime Texas Congressman Michael McCall, who's used to strolling to victory. But oops, in September, with only weeks to go in his re-election race, he found himself in a dead heat with Democrat Mike Siegel, a former school teacher with a progressive populist program of Medicare for all, worker and environmental protections, human rights over corporate greed, etc. Siegel has forged a surging and enthusiastic movement for change. So here comes McCall with a last-minute down-and-dirty $1 million TV blitz, howling that Siegel is a crazed criminal justice radical who'll shut down the police and empty the prisons. McCall himself doesn't appear in this ludicrous dog whistle piece of racist fabrication. Instead, he's put up a white Republican constable wearing his official uniform on camera to do the dirty work. The partisan constable cartoonishly tries to gin up voter fear. "Take it from me," he dramatically intones, "Mike Siegel is a threat to your family." This is Jim Hightower saying, problem is, McCall's gun-toting goofball of a frontman is a notorious right-wing race baiter. But he's just the dummy. McCall is the despicable ventriloquist, mouthing fear and hate in a pathetic attempt to save his worthless political hide.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of truth. The Leslie Marshall Show.
We're back with the president of the United Steelworkers, Mr. Tom Conway. Like I said, be sure to go to the website, USW.org. On Twitter and Instagram, follow them at Steelworkers. President Conway, thank you for holding. Welcome back. Let's spend the last half of this hour talking about something that's really important, and that's why I saved the best for last, you might say. And you know, the election is weeks away, and a lot of people say, where's the plan? Whether there's a plan for COVID or a plan for healthcare, especially if you want to gut it, where is the plan? And Joe Biden has one. There are people out there that say his plan is commonsensical and that it will help to revitalize American manufacturing. It's comprehensive, as it would need to be. There's an innovation strategy that will marshal the resources of the federal government in ways that we haven't seen since World War II. So we're going to break down his plan. There are 6 main categories and efforts to remake American manufacturing and innovation so that the future is made in America by all of America's workers. And I like that. But first off, before we break down these 6, President Conway, just your first take when you first heard about the former Vice President, Democratic nominee Joe Biden's plan to revitalize American manufacturing. Just off the top, before you started to get into the weeds with this, what was your take on his proposal?
Look, I thought it was just, in some ways, there is a lot of common sense to it, and the foundation of it is that we're gonna build things here in America, and the things that we're buying from around the world, there's no reason they can't be built here. And in many cases, they were invented here. The technology comes from here. The innovativeness comes from here. And then we sent it offshore and we let it go and get made somewhere else. So I think it involves a very systematic, planned re-entrenchment of that and bringing that work back here again, and not just allowing it through corporations to decide where it's going to be made, but that there's an overall plan in America to have a manufacturing policy and a program for having the supply chain and the products made here. And I think that is fundamental to it, and it's just makes a lot of sense to everybody that we talk to about it, and they're happy to see it come forward and to have it laid out in what really is a straightforward and simple way in 6 points about how we can rebuild manufacturing in this country.
The first point of that is Buy American. And I remember President Conway, when I was a little girl, I looked at this little teacup, a cup and saucer. I was a little girl and I was using like money from my piggy bank to buy something as a gift from my mother. And I was with my grandmother. And I looked at it and I said, I can afford this. What do you think, Meme? She was French. And she turned it over and she said, it's crap. And I said, why? And she turned it over and showed me. And she said, you see that? And it said made in China. And she goes, it's not good. It's not good. So I was little. I was kind of conditioned as a kid that if something's made in China, it's not good. And actually, that's kind of true. It's sad. There was a time in our nation, we used to have that when you are, shopping, look for the Union label, and I'm not going to sing it, that a lot of, kids and adults would hum that catchy tune. There was a time in our nation where twofold. One, we as consumers felt a responsibility to buy American, and 2, we had products we could choose from. More. We do have American products, but not as many products made in America now as should be. And when you look at Buy American, this is a simple thing where the government can help, by having manufacturing here, bringing manufacturing back, and the American people, the voter, the consumers can help by buying American. And Joe Biden, his first thing is to buy American, and to make Buy American real, he wants to make a $400 billion procurement investment that together coupled with his clean energy and infrastructure plan, will power new demand for American products, materials, and services, and ensure that they are shipped on U.S. flagged cargo carriers. Some people would say that's awesome, but is it realistic? Is it? I think it sounds very realistic, especially when it's packaged like that.
I think it's very realistic. This is a discussion in this first part about government procurement, and the government buys a tremendous amount of products all year long, and creates a tremendous market. And so what Biden is essentially saying is our government is not going to buy from some other country or some other government. And we haven't seen that happen under the Trump administration. So if our government says to itself, to its agencies, its Department of Transportation, its Department of Defense, where it's making investments in infrastructure around the country, where it's partners in a bridge or partners in a road or partners in a light rail project, that whatever you're going to put into that project, if the government's investing in it and we're investing U.S. taxpayer dollars, then U.S. taxpayers ought to get the first benefit from it. It's actually very simple. It's not new money. It's the same money we're spending now, and it's just going to ensure that it gets done here. So, when the government plays a role in a lot of investments that go on in the U.S. in energy and infrastructure, in sort of hibernating or incubating new industries, those things ought to be made in the country. And so I think it's simple and it's straightforward and it's very achievable.
Yeah, because to your point, he doesn't just propose buy American, obviously make it in America. And that's his second of the six prongs of this plan, to retool and revitalize American manufacturers with a particular focus on small manufacturers and manufacturing factories that are owned by women, people of color. And he wants to do it through specific incentives, additional resources, and new financing tools. How important is it to focus and to have a particular focus on smaller manufacturers and female and people of color-owned manufacturing outlets?
Look, I think America has to recognize there are changes going on in a lot of ways. And so when you look at this second piece of it, where it talks about focus on small manufacturing, most of our jobs are in small manufacturing and in small business. And we know that drives the economy in America. And we also know that when we look back and watch what's going on with this pandemic, it is having a particularly harsh impact in communities of color, in communities where there's lesser resources, where there's been less resource, less incentive put in there, less investment, for a whole lot of reasons. So if you couple those things together, and this is not about just give people of color small businesses. This is about all small businesses, all manufacturing, but make a focus in those areas in our communities that need those jobs. That eventually ripples into stronger, better, healthier communities that need less going forward, and that they have good jobs and good foundations in them. So I think this is a thoughtful and smart idea to help all Americans move forward in a revitalization of American manufacturing.
His third idea is to innovate in America, make a new $300 billion investment in R&D, research and development, and breakthrough technologies, anything from electric vehicle technology to lightweight materials to 5G, also AI, artificial intelligence. Would this unleash, as they predict, a high quality of job creation in high value manufacturing and technology fields?
Look, when you do research and development, when you have laboratories who are designed to solve problems and break through things, any company that has R&D, it usually has its factories located close to it. So the engineers can work closely together with the operations in the factory and bring their products to market. So having your R&D located in your country and not off somewhere else sort of feeds the fact that then, well, our factories are going to be close by. So if electric vehicle technology and buses and transportation and rail restructuring is going to take off, you have that R&D close by. And the lightweighting materials and 5G And fiber optics and the glasses that go into making that kind of cable is important to have your
Absolutely.
R&D for close by. So that does
Absolutely.
spring high-quality jobs.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. We'll talk about numbers 4, 5, and 6 of the Biden plan and proposals to bring American manufacturing back to America where it should be. I'm Leslie Marshall. Back in a moment.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates. That's right. By replacing get-togethers with virtual play dates and video chats, they can help slow the evil spread of germs. And if your superheroes do go outside, make sure they continue their superhero wing by staying 6 feet away from others to protect everyone in America land. Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council. America, your children have an amazing superpower. That's right. They can help save lives by simply washing their hands. Just 20 seconds of thorough hand washing after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside can help fight against the dastardly spread of germs. Armed with only soap and water and hands, your superhero can protect you, your family, and everyone out there in America land. Amazing! Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
He was the heart of your family, and he taught you our history. He helped you fix your first flat. He was the best backyard DJ around, and every time he'd tell a story, he'd own the room. But now more than ever, he may feel alone. Today, older adults and their loved ones are struggling to connect, in a time when connection has never been more important. But there is something we can do. Embrace our older loved ones through StoryCorps Connect. With StoryCorps Connect, you can honor seniors remotely with an interview about their life. Every interview will be archived at the Library of Congress, becoming part of American history, so that years from now, future generations can listen in.
All right, Grandpa, what's one piece of advice you have for me?
Just 3 words, sweetheart. Live with courage. The man that had the best stories still has plenty of stories to tell.
Welcome to Code WAC, your podcast on America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. I'm your host, Brenda Gazzar. Today, we'll talk about how Latinx immigrants are faring amid the coronavirus pandemic. Angelica Salas is the longtime executive director of CHIRLA, which she transformed into a mass membership immigrant-led organization, advancing their human, civil, and labor rights. So how would you say Latinx communities here in SoCal have been affected by the coronavirus pandemic?
It's devastating. I had the unfortunate experience to both have family members who are suffering from coronavirus, who have been infected, some who have been able to survive it. But then also in our membership at CHIRLA, we have seen members who have passed away because of coronavirus. These are immigrant workers, Latinos, Latinas, who are working because there is no safety net for them. And so their survival is work, and that means that they put themselves in a very vulnerable and very dangerous situation.
So what can be done to alleviate these challenges?
Well, first and foremost, I think during this moment, there should be no distinction in terms of immigration status. There really should not be a distinction as to who gets care or who gets this access to a safety net, who's able to stay home to take care of their health and who's not. That just all these distinctions make no sense during a global pandemic. We believe that there should be full immigrant inclusion in all aspects of care, including health care.
Find more Code WAC episodes on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. You can also listen to Code WAC at heal-ca.org. This podcast is powered by Heal California, uplifting the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. I'm Brenda Gazzar.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com.
We are back with the president of the United Steelworkers, Mr. Tom Conway. The Steelworkers are North America's largest industrial union, and you can find out more about them at their website, USW.org. Also go to Twitter. Follow them there at Steelworkers, and the same on Instagram at Steelworkers. President Conway is our guest, and we are talking about Joe Biden's common sense plan to revitalize American manufacturing. It's 6 different aspects and facets of the plan. We were talking about the first 3, so let's get to 4, 5, and 6. President Conway, thank you for holding and welcome back. Number 4 is to invest in all of America, and that would ensure investments reach all of America so that we draw on the full talents and invest in the potential of all our communities and all our workers. And economically, economists have even said that our nation is not at full strength when investments, venture capital, educational opportunities, and paths to good jobs are limited by race, the zip code somebody lives in, their gender identity or sexual orientation, if they're disabled, what religion they practice, or where they come from if they weren't born in the United States. Joe Biden will ensure that the major public investments in his plan, procurement, R&D, infrastructure, training, and education, reach all Americans across all states and regions, including urban and rural communities as well, with historic investments in communities of color and an emphasis on small business. We talked about small business with manufacturing, women owned manufacturing, people of color who own manufacturing. But something we don't always talk about is education. When I was coming up, a lot of people, went to college, but a lot of people went to trade schools, which is, and honestly, a lot of the guys that went to trade schools were making a lot more money than I did, in my 20s and 30s. Is this something when Joe Biden talks about, President Conway, that this is really a competition or a race or an election between Scranton and Park Avenue? Does this play into that? Allowing all Americans to have all the same opportunities and to have education, not just in white collar jobs, but in blue collar jobs as well, because you need education and you need training. I mean, not everybody is going to, put on a suit and work at a bank 9 to 5, and nor should they. We have so many different talents among Americans.
Look, there's a dignity in work, and the work that's sort of made this nation and made it a strong nation is the work that people have done kind of by their hands, by building and by creating and by inventing things. And it's a fairly recent phenomenon that we've been in the so-called knowledge industry that we moved into in the last 25 years, a field of artificial intelligence and computers. And that stuff has been great, and it's provided great jobs for people. But it seems like along the way, we said, well, if you're not in this knowledge industry or if you're not in finance, then there's no place for you. And then in reality, we sort of let all that work go, and all that education and all that vocational training and the apprenticeships that provided such stable work for people and for families. And so I think to have that as part of an overall plan on how you're going to rebuild across the nation and provide opportunities is a really smart approach to say, we're going to have an education program that gives those citizens who want to do that kind of work the skills to do it, and not just sort of pigeonhole people into wherever they want to go. So, rather than telling young, bright, smart kids, well, you've got to get a finance training and go get a Wall Street job, you can get an engineering training and go do work in manufacturing or civil engineering or so many different fields that are out there where you can, make changes in the environment, make changes in the way manufacturing is done, and do things for society that are crucial. And I think that is the underpinning that Biden talks about when he's talking about we're going to do it across our nation, in all our areas, in all our zip codes, and build this opportunity in for everybody, regardless of who they are. And I think having that approach, that holistic approach with a plan to do it and carry it out is going to succeed. It's going to work.
I agree. If you look at 5 and 6, 5, stand up for America to pursue a pro American worker tax and trade strategy to fix the harmful policies of the Trump administration and give our manufacturers and give those working in manufacturing the fair shot they need to compete for jobs and market share and supply America. Bring back those critical supply chains to America so that we're not dependent on China or any other country for the production of critical goods in a crisis. And that is the nucleus of it, isn't it, President Conway? If we could break this dependency on China, we could bring back the jobs, bring back the manufacturing, and more Americans would buy American because there are more American things that are made here to buy.
It's kind of the difference between saying America first and putting your money where your mouth is. And when you look at those two items, 5 and 6, they have to do with making investments to make sure that you do, in fact, put America first. And so you're going to build your supply chains. You're going to have a tax and trade policy and strategy that incents people to do it here. And those are the things that make a difference and will make this happen rather than just, make a hat that says "Make America Great Again," and that's all you do is sell hats.
Right, made in China.
This has to do with building the supply chain. Yeah. So, look, we're pleased at this policy. We think it makes sense, not just because we're a manufacturing union, because we have a lot of other people in our union too. 50,000 healthcare workers, teachers, grad students, faculties. I mean, this is an approach for our country that's good for our country and good for our communities, and it's why we're behind Biden and fighting so hard to see that we get through this election and turn this country in the right direction.
Well, one of the reasons that, I support Joe Biden is in addition to bringing back all the jobs that were lost this year, his plan to ensure the future is made all in America, these products and manufacturing. It's actually going to, if you look at the numbers, because everything's numbers, whether it's an election or legislation or a plan like this plan will help create at least 5 million new jobs in manufacturing and innovation. And that's not just the Biden campaign saying it. Goldman Sachs, Moody, other top economists have said job creation, jobs will flourish and will be created more so under this proposal and other economic strategies proposed by Joe Biden than we have seen from Donald Trump in this administration.
When you invest in a manufacturing job in your community, you get a ripple effect of 3 to 4 jobs that support it in the dry cleaner, in the restaurant, in the salon, in the barber shop. And so having 5 million manufacturing jobs just grows exponentially on its own. And in all those communities, it then creates those small business opportunities and those and entrepreneurial opportunities for people to go out and create a supporting job or a business around that. So having manufacturing in your backbone is a very smart approach to having a strong economy. And I think that's the basis for this plan.
Yes. One of the things I like about this plan, and I'm sure you do, President Conway, is this plan puts workers first and workers in good jobs, these good jobs that can support our communities. When you look at Biden's record on workers' rights, he's openly supported the Protecting the Right to Organize, the PRO Act. That will help restore the balance of power between ordinary workers and the powerful corporations. He'll also stand up for working families by fighting for workplace health and safety, affordable health care, retirement security. And now we're trying to pull ourselves out of this economic destruction caused by COVID. Workers need this type of a plan and this type of leadership. Can you speak to that? You're the last word in the interview of President Conway.
Look, I think one of the things that if people listen to Joe Biden, they'll hear him talk about unions a lot. And that's just not to gain political support from unions. That's about the recognition that people ought to be able to have a right to sit down, work with their employer, collectively bargain an agreement, build back into a system that works, because collective bargaining does work. Yes. And then it recognizes that workers are where the future of this is going to lie. So if you empower your workforce to work with the corporations in your country, you are going to succeed. And I think Biden gets that. He understands it. That is the difference between Scranton and Park Avenue. And I think he's captured that. So it's not as if he's just talking to some union leader who's going to invest money in his campaign. He's talking to union leaders who know how to sit down and bring things forward and work together to have a good, thriving enterprise where they work.
Absolutely.
And
when people work and they feel good about themselves, they can take care of their families, and then they go buy stuff, which is good for the economy. President Conway, you were good for our country. You were good for the union as president of the United Steelworkers, and you were great to be on this show with us. Thank you. Go to the website, USW.org. Follow on Twitter and Instagram @Steelworkers. I'm Leslie Marshall. Our guest has been President Tom Conway.